Davis Martin has been sharp. So has Martin Perez, Jonathan Cannon, and Sean Burke. Well, they've given up some runs. So let's go over how the race to be the opening day starter is going on today's episode of Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and the site expert of SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the Fanside Network. And also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And also follow or subscribe to the show at wherever you get your podcasts. Well, besides being one of the few players the White Sox had that was worth watching, Garrett Crochet was also a bona fide ace worthy of the opening day start. Now that he's gone, let's discuss how Davis Martin, Jonathan Cannon, and Martin Perez have started off the competition for the honors, along with the dark horse candidate, Sean Burke. Then the hope for a reunion with Jose Quintana is officially over. Let's discuss how the Sox missed out on a chance to get some fan goodwill and a viable tradable asset at the deadline. And the folks at Future Sox are releasing their top 30 prospect rankings, and they started out with their 16 through 30. They made an interesting point in that 9 of these 16 came from outside the organization. With hardly any trade assets left, I want to go over how this is just another example of the Sox needing to hit in the draft and international free agency from here on out. So, obviously, still early in the race, but Davis Martin, he is out to the lead, in my opinion, to be the opening day starter. Now, that comes with the asterisk that he's gotten 2 starts so far. He's gotten 2 starts so far in this competition, while his Jonathan Cannon and Martin Perez, they've only gotten 1 spring training start. But still, in those 2, Martin has looked downright unhittable, and that's because he's only given up 1 hit. Although Sean Burke's first start got me thinking, not only should he be in the rotation because he looked like, he picked up right where he left off from those 3 amazing starts that he made in September, but he should also be a dark horse because, hey, he looked darn good in his first start. And you know what? No one thought Garrett Crochet would end up as the opening day starter last spring, and look at what happened, especially after the Dylan Cease trade. I mean, that was definitely a big question mark of who's going to be the opening day starter now that Dylan Cease is gone. And we got it in Garrett Crochet, and he obviously thrived. And I think Sean Burke could potentially have that similar trajectory, just only from pitching right side. But a decent outing against the Athletics yesterday probably did more to solidify his grasp on the 4th starter spot than being the opening day starter. So I would say, ranking it right now, and again, I would say we're at the quarter mark of this race. I mean, if Will Venable announced his opening day starter today, I think that would be a huge shock because we still have, a bunch of spring training to go to get an accurate assessment of who should technically be, when you're listing out your rotation, the number 1 starter. Even though these 3 guys I'm talking about, they don't exactly have the stuff to be an ace, but they do have the stuff to be obviously very good pitchers, and I'll get to that in a minute. But I would say right now it's Davis Martin. He's the opening day starter, especially if his kick change that he had last season continues to basically be unhittable like it's been in spring training. Then I'd have Martin Perez at number 2, Jonathan Cannon 3, and then Burke. And then in terms of like who's in the race for the 5th starter, I think you got to technically put Shane Smith there, the Rule 5 pick, just because he did look darn good in his most recent start after he looked awful against the Rangers. And if he's hitting almost 100 on the gun, you might want to try him out actually as a starter. What can it hurt? And then maybe Nick Nastrini too to take the ball, especially if Drew Thorpe is not going to be ready in time to be, when the Sox need a 5th starter. Because the other thing is right now, you just want to focus on these 4 because I don't think the Sox need a 5th starter until mid-April. They should be good through the first couple of weeks with all the off days. So they probably don't need that 5th starter until mid-April. So that's why maybe you give Shane Smith the try the 5th starter, because you can you got to keep him on the roster anyway, because you took him with the number 1 pick in the Rule 5 draft. You got to keep him on the roster the entire year to have him stick in your organization. Otherwise, you got to offer him back up to Milwaukee, and you got to pay $50,000 to send him back. So I think, that's kind of where the rotation is heading. But man, Martin made a strong case with an excellent outing on Sunday against the Los Angeles Dodgers. He faced Shohei Ohtani too and struck him out along with 2 more. No walks in his first 2 starts, 5 Ks, and this guy is using off-speed stuff as a finishing pitch. They're talking about that kick change that him and pitching czar Brian Bannister put in. Now, is it going to make him an ace? Probably not. But is it going to make him a good pitcher, a solid back of the rotation guy? Heck yeah. And even in 2022, Davis Martin was trending, he was making some spot starts to be like, hey, this guy could be a viable fourth or fifth starting pitcher. And there's actually nothing wrong with that. For those that are always skeptical about the White Sox, and trust me, the White Sox have earned your cynicism. They've earned your skepticism. But they have to build. This isn't a rebuild. This is a build. They have to build a team now. And there's nothing wrong with having good players too, because you have to fill out a future competitive roster. If you want to believe things are going to get better, and I think you have to at this point, if you're still a White Sox fan, you got to still have faith that, okay, just because Davis Martin isn't going to be a star doesn't mean he can't be a viable fourth or fifth starting option, especially since this team doesn't pay for pitching. And I believe Martin can be that guy. However, the skeptic in you, the cynic in you, you could be saying to yourself, Todd, shouldn't the opening day starter be a legit ace and not a guy with a ceiling of back-end starter? Yes, but that's the state of the rotation that we're currently in right now, because they only put $6.5 million into it in terms of free agent spending. That's what they paid for Martin Perez and Bryce Wilson, another contender for the fifth spot, into the rotation. And I'll get into the second segment about how they missed an opportunity to add Jose Quintana on such a cheap price. And it just speaks, though, to the context that the guys who have the ace stuff in the Sox farm system, they're just not ready for prime time. So that doesn't mean the White Sox don't have guys that can be studs. And Sean Burke, he might be a stud. There's the injury history concerns and all that, and obviously he's got to now pitch when baseball comes for him, because he's only made 3 starts. And it's not like in spring training they're really looking over the film. So what's he going to look like when obviously, there's plenty of film on him, plenty of data, and hitters start to make adjustments. But he is trending. The trajectory right now is, he could be a very, very good, number 3, even a top of the line rotation pitcher. But he's just got to pass the next test. But in terms of guys that are ready for, prime time that could be aces, they're just not there yet. Noah Schultz, Hagen Smith, and Grant Taylor's everydayers have heard me talk. They have the potential to be on a, where they could be the opening day starter for years to come. They could have that like Mark Burley run, or even Chris Sale before he gets traded. But they still have to develop in the minors. So what the White Sox have right now is more of their young pitching that they're, touting. The guys that are more at the 3, 4, and 5 spot that are coming up right now. And again, that's not a bad thing. As I'm confident, and you and I have seen Davis Martin and Jonathan Cannon, they can pitch well enough to be reliable, good 4th and 5th starters on even a more talented rotation. I think those 2 guys could pitch on any 29 other, they could be on all 29 other rosters. They could. They're probably, and even depending, the Rockies, they might be a little bit higher, obviously. But like, say you throw them on the Yankees. I think they could contend for the 4th and 5th starter. And you can be like, well, I'm confident in them. I've seen them pitch. They've got good stuff. And it's also not a knock, as they do have some limitations. But it's not enough. Like, again, you want these guys to keep progressing nicely, because what you just don't want to see is, them rolling out like Dylan Covey as the 5th starter and be like, well, that's a loss right there, or it's going to be a long, long day. Martin and Cannon have the potential to give the Sox an opportunity to win with every start. And that's just what you want from the back end. You want guys that can eat innings, get outs, give you a chance to win. Although Cannon looked a bit shaky in his first outing, and again, the early inning struggles, that was a problem for him last season. Not the greatest first impression, gave up 2 runs on 4 hits, as he only had 1 strikeout against the Los Angeles Angels in 2 innings. But Perez is, I'm going with Perez, but, I know Baseball Reference has it spelled P-A-I-R, so Perez, but I'm going with Perez. That's what seems like everybody's going with. He was impressive in his first start. Just gave up a hit in the first inning, settled down, got through 2 innings, picked up a strikeout. But yeah, Sean Burke probably lost a bit on his dark horse candidacy for opening day, as, he's the first guy to go 3 innings now in his second start, because, they're just slowly building them up. So Burke goes 3 innings yesterday against the A's. He gives up 5 hits, allowed 2 runs, walked 2, struck out 1. The 2 runs, though, came on a 2-run first inning homer by Jacob Wilson. So at least second and third inning, he kept the not Sacramento Athletics to just 2 runs. I just think that's terrible that the Athletics are just like, we're going to be the A's. you're playing in Sacramento for the next 3 years, and who knows if you're ever going to be playing in Las Vegas. Just embrace being Sacramento. Just move to Sacramento. You're going to get people to show up. They're going to sell out that stadium. Even though it's a minor league ballpark, they're going to sell it out because Sacramento only has the Kings and they go to Kings games, that type of stuff. But we still have a couple more weeks to go before this race is obviously likely finalized, so we'll check in probably a week or two on this. However, the ideal opening day starter would have been Jose Quintana, but he's now officially on the Brewers. So let's discuss how the Sox missed out on a golden opportunity at a reunion, especially given for what he signed for, and we'll discuss that after the break. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, make sure to hit the like button on today's episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, Locked On White Sox is available on all major podcast platforms. So make sure to follow or subscribe on places such as Apple or Spotify. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me. 1 second there. A little dry there. For those watching on YouTube, just had to take some sip of water. I can do that, folks. So don't get me wrong. I actually like what Martin Perez brings to the table. But you know what I would have liked more? What Jose Quintana and Martin Perez would have brought to the table in the same rotation. I would have really enjoyed that. And I've been one of those that was clamoring for a reunion with Quintana. It made all the sense in the world. All the offseason prognosticators thought so too. If you went over any top 50 free agent list, first of all, Jose Quintana was there. And that was one of the few names that was actually, the White Sox were linked to. And especially, they needed a lefty, given that Garrett Crochet was traded. So they needed a lefty to replace him in the rotation. And everydayers have heard me make the argument on how his swing and miss stuff, I've talked about on a few episodes, is still there. It's just not at the level of last decade, but that would have helped the rotation because you have to replace now Garrett Crochet's swing and miss stuff. Well, the reunion was likely not going to happen given the tight budget the Sox are under, and it's now officially dead as he signed with the Brewers. However, you look at what the Brewers signed him for, and you think, did the Sox even try to make a run at this guy? Did they? Because this is what MLB.com's Mark Feinstein, and then I love Ryan McGuffey from the recap and 670 Scores Inside the Clubhouse co-host responded. So first of all, this is what Mark Feinstein, I have the tweet up for those watching on YouTube, and this is at Feinsand. So Mark Feinsand, this is what he tweets. Jose Quintana will earn $4.25 million on his 1-year deal with the Brewers. Per source, it's a $4 million salary and a $250K roster bonus. And this is what Ryan McGuffey, at Ryan McGuffey, he quote tweeted. I'm back to not understanding why the hashtag White Sox would not have signed him at a larger sum. And think about that. He actually signed for less total dollars than Martin Perez. Because yes, Martin Perez is technically going to make $3.5 million this year, but he's still owed a guaranteed $1.5 million buyout next year, after the season. So, they actually could have saved money. And when they're, pinching their pennies here, that actually makes a difference. They could have saved money by bringing Jose Quintana back and could have gotten a ton of fan goodwill. I mean, I get the logic if the Sox did not want to block some developmental innings. Say if Kai Bush was healthy or Drew Thorpe's recovery was right on time. I get it if they're like, we're only going with one veteran and Martin Perez wanted to get here before spring training. So we went with him. Totally fine with it. And I'm fine if they went one or the other. Completely comfortable with it. But since you have these circumstances where you actually could have actually brought in Quintana and him not blocking anybody's developmental runway, you should have asked owner Jerry Reinsdorf to shake out his couch cushions to come up with the extra $4 million. And then you could have had Perez and Quintana. And as everydayers have heard me say lately, I'm fine if the Sox bring in a veteran so long as they don't have a core piece prospect who can immediately help right away. Or they just don't have another option to get them precious big league innings. Okay? So that's why technically I'm fine if Colson Montgomery breaks camp in spring training, because even though I'd like to, yes, I agree he should have more seasoning at AAA, he still is kind of getting close to being, help, and he is a projected core piece, and I'd rather see him get the developmental innings at the big league and learn through his struggles and all that maybe at the big leagues, rather than see Jacob Amaya just field the ball because that's all he can do. But in the terms of The veteran talent, especially at pitching, I'm fine with it because you can showcase a veteran talent to be traded, eat some innings, and flip. The only one that I'm not happy with is Mike Clevenger. And it's not being woke, folks. It's because the market has spoken. He has no trade value. You can't flip him at the deadline. Okay? On the flip side, though, when it comes to these showcasing these veterans, I just want a tighter leash if they struggle. I don't know. I don't want to go through what happened in 2024 when they just did not know when to cut the cord. First moment of struggling, DFA. Okay? Especially if it was, if Quintana was struggling. It's a $4.25 million contract. Or the first moment you get a decent offer, trade him. Stop holding on to him. They held on to Tommy Pham way too long. But, Quintana obviously isn't going to fetch you a Dylan Cease or Eloy Jimenez anymore when they were stud prospects. But at a $4.25 million contract, especially for the Sox, it was $5 million. And if he matches what he did for the Mets in 2024, you get something promising back. Think about it. You could have had a rotation of Quintana, Perez, Martin, Cannon, and Burke. Now you feel really, really comfortable about what they're doing. Bryce Wilson becomes your swing pitcher. You get Shane Smith, who's showing promise. You throw him in the bullpen. Nick Nastarini can be used out of the bullpen. Jared Chester can be used out of the bullpen. Jairo Uriarte can be in the bullpen. All of them can be used out of the bullpen. You can still give them some innings. They're not getting in the way. Or you just keep them stretched out in Charlotte because you're going to move Perez and Quintana. And having Quintana would also allow you to be more patient with Thorpe's recovery. Because I don't want him to feel like he has to rush back. Obviously, these guys, they want to be out there. They want to help their teammates. But the White Sox have this thing called time. Nobody's expecting anything out of them. So if Drew Thorpe needs time to make sure his elbow, doesn't have another setback, make sure his elbow is fine, to make sure that surgery that is supposed to shave down that bone spur that they theorize as former Barons pitching coach, I know he said it on the White Sox talk, Jonathan Eli said that bone spur may have been hampering him getting some additional velocity on his fastball that has no movement. But if that bone spur, gets taken care of, and if he can get back up to his 94 that the scouting report used to say, that's going to help him actually reach his ace potential with his spin stuff. But if his fastball is at 91, we all saw it last year. The 3 times he got rocked was because if he's not locating with that non-movement fastball that's 91, it's going to get crushed. And then he can't set up his devastating changeup. But if you have a tick, even 3 miles per hour, that matters because it can get past guys sometimes. Sorry if my stomach's rumbling. It's lunchtime. I should probably have eaten something before then. But that matters. So you can afford it to, give Thorpe some time, because it looks like he's going to get an IL stint. Give him some time. Heck, maybe he goes down to the minors for a few weeks until Quintana gets flipped. But that would have been nice. And for those that are saying, well, they've got all these, this is logjam. The Brewers, small market Brewers, by the way, and I haven't mentioned the Brewers much lately, guys. Have been good. They have some young arms vying for that 5th starter spot, but they thought, you know what? Let's go get this guy for a song. And they did. And this is MLB Brewers beat reporter Anna McKelvey. This is what he tweeted at ML McKelvey. With Quintana pending physical, the Brewers are set up like so in the starting pitching department. Peralta, Cortez, Myers, Savalier, Quintana, Ashby as a starter reliever, Woodruff when healthy, Hall when healthy as a starter reliever, Mizrewski, Henderson, Patrick in the minors. Look at that depth that they've built them for themselves. And they could have brought up Jacob Mizrewski, one of their top pitching prospects. DL Hall is injured too, but when he's healthy, he could be a swing guy. They're utilizing their stuff right, but they also said, you know what? Hey, at $4.25 million, why not bring the guy in? Help us compete. And in the White Sox, yes, they're not going to win much, but why not get some arms in to help you win more than 41 games? That would have been nice. At least that's what, a lot of fans, that's all they're asking for. Just don't put us through historically bad. And I get Quintana striking out 200 batters a season. They're over. They're long gone. But when the Sox are having to promote weird arm angles and off-speed stuff just to induce weak contact to make up for the lack of pitchers with swing and miss stuff, they could have easily added a pitcher who still has some shades of swing and miss stuff at the low price of $4.25 million. And that's another reason why I hate that they gave $5.8 million to Andrew Vaughn. It's like how tight they're pinching their pennies. They could have gotten that freed up some more money. You could have had Miguel Vargas or Tim Elko or Oscar Colas fill first base very cheaply, or platoon him even with Joey Gallo. And you could have used that to get a valuable asset, get some goodwill from the fans. Instead, well, we're stuck with just half of a veteran pitcher in Martin Perez. And again, I've said it, don't get me wrong, I like Martin Perez. All right, FutureSox.net has released their first part of their top 30 rankings, and actually MLB.com just released their top 30 rankings. But the thing that I found interesting from James Fox, Ian Eskridge, and Elijah Evans and the rest of the gang at FutureSox.net that do great work, they found a trend when they were, when they released their 16 through 30 rankings. And I want to go over as another example of why the Sox have to hit in the draft and international free agency going forward if this rebuild is ever going to be completed with the team getting back to competing for the division. And that's after the break on Locked On White Sox. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off, or you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. And I always maintain FanDuel's traditional spreads, the money lines, and the over-unders, they're fun to play. But if you want to hit big, the futures, the parlays, and the props, that's the way to go. Plus, the app is easy to use, and if you win, you can get paid instantly. And right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode and recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox, wherever they get their podcasts, as this show is available on all major podcast platforms. So as everydayers know, I love the work of FutureSox.net, especially when it comes to covering the team's prospects, because they're dedicated to watching the team's prospects. I believe Ian Eskridge has probably watched more White Sox minor league baseball than anybody walking this earth, probably more than some of the White Sox front office staff. And they just released their first part of their top 30 rankings, so check it out at FutureSox.net. But James Fox and the gang immediately pointed out when they tweeted it out under at FutureSox, 9 of the 16 prospects they ranked 16 through 30 came via trades. So that means the Sox once again have to use other teams to get young talent. And it's just another example of why the Sox are always trading away their good players, because the farm system can't produce core pieces, or they can't produce attractive pieces to trade for guys that put you over the top. And this cycle just continues and continues and continues. Also, not being willing to pay to keep their good players is another reason why they have to keep trading for guys. But still, this is just a snippet of the 16 through 30. Winkelmann Gonzalez at 16. They got through the Crochet trade. Kai Bush at 17. Lucas Giolito and Ronaldo Lopez trade. Jarrell Perez at 18. The Eric Fetty, Michael Kopech 3-team deal. That also brought us another prospect with a broken leg, Alexander Albertus, who is ranked 20th. William Bergolla is 21st. Tanner Banks deal. Number 22, Samuel Zavala. Dylan Cease trade. Number 24, Juan Carlaw. The Kenyon Middleton trade with the New York Yankees. Nick Nastrini, number 25. That's the Lance Lynn trade. Jake Eder, the number 26 ranked prospect. That's the Jake Burger trade. Look at the talent that I just mentioned that was actually shipped out to get even prospects 16 through 30. That sounds like a lot of guys that, they could have helped you at least not lose 121 games. However, they probably would have led you to nowhere. So it's not like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they traded him. Although Jake Burger, that was the biggest mistake. That was the highlight of the White Sox dysfunction when Kenny Williams and Rick Hahn were running the team, because Kim Ng just called Kenny Williams as like, I'll give you Jake Eder, an older pitching prospect coming off, arm surgery, just for a, guy who hits home runs, good guy in the community, people that, fans love. Sure, why not? It just shows you it just shows you that you want organizational depth in the 16 to 30 ranked prospects. They do matter. as those guys can either be used for cost-effective bullpen pieces. They can eventually go up the prospect rankings to be considered core pieces. This actually does matter. They can be used to flip at the trade deadline to help get a piece that helps you put over the top. But at the very least, they could be just cheap, young depth players. And the Sox have to keep going to other organizations to get those guys because they can't draft it or they can't internationally sign it. And if their top 15, if future Sox top 15 looks anything like MLB.com's, and it just came out, as I already wrote my notes. So I want to go over, here's a couple of the top 15 that MLB Pipeline put out. It's a little bit more now skewed to the White Sox that they've actually drafted, but it's Noah Schultz 1, Hagen Smith is 3, Colson Montgomery is 4, guys that they actually drafted or signed internationally. Grant Taylor 7, George Wokel is 10, and Caleb Bonemer is 11, Mason Adams 12, Sean Burke 13, Jacob Gonzalez 14, Brian Ramos 15. But still, when it comes to your position prospects, your core guys at your top 15, it's Kyle Teal. They had to get in the trade with Garrett Crochet. Same with Braden Montgomery. Edgar Carroll came in the same trade that Kai Bush came over. Chase Mydroth, he's number 8. This is MLB Pipelines. He came over, obviously, in the Crochet trade. Jairo Uriarte. You're talking about the Dylan Cease deal. So you're still talking about having to go outside your organization to get core pieces. And after Luis Robert Jr. is traded, if he is traded because the injury risk, the Sox no longer have a trade asset that's going to get you a lot of top young talent for a while. Maybe Martin Perez has an Eric Fetty-like season and you can flip him. The only other thing that I can think of is then the Sox have to decide, do they leverage Davis Martin and Jonathan Cannon into a trade asset if they're producing? And, because the Sox have a ton of depth to overcome their loss. But still, after our LRJ is gone, they're going to have to hit in the draft and international free agent signing because the pipeline to get that young talent is going to be dried up in terms of using trades. It's done after Luis Robert Jr. is gone. And I just listed out to who to think about on the MLB pipeline. So that's why the Sox have got to start getting better at drafting position prospects, just like they've done with pitching. They've got to get better and then developing those players. And I would still recommend a draft strategy of rounds 1 through 4 being the best player available, with the caveat of maybe, yes, the first round pick should be a pitcher just because the team doesn't pay for it. And swing and miss guys, they're only getting more expensive. And it's easier to find swing and miss guys in the first round than it is, say, later, in the draft. But it's also a chance to get top 150 guys, and you can overslot them. And you can get high school players with high floors. You just got to get them and invest in their development, and then use picks 5 through 17 on pitching or college bats. Hopefully then you can underslot them. But still, when they're there, invest in them because this team doesn't pay players. Even if Justin Ishbia buys a team someday, still give them a deep pool of prospects of which to make blockbuster trades. But then I would use picks 18 through 20, circle back to see if you can steal a first rounder, as they say. Meaning, do you have leftover bonus money to say, hey, here's a 6-figure deal. Why don't you join the minors right now? I can pay you. And the Sox did actually try that. They were following the process in last year's draft. That's why I like last year's draft. They tried that with their 20th pick. I forgot his name, and I couldn't find the notes there. I know he's at Florida State. I watched him over the weekend. Big dude. They just couldn't do it because they just didn't have enough money left over. But that's still good process. And then in your international free agent signing, hit the Dominican hard. Also use Venezuela. They've got good players. Use your ties to Ozzie Guillen, the godfather of Venezuelan baseball. I'm still not opposed to Cuban players because you still have a brand there. But then start opening up the Pacific Rim for yourself. Basically be in 5 countries and hit them hard. So, that's just, it's going to be another example of why they have to do well in the draft after they trade Luis Robert Jr. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On Fantasy Baseball podcast with hosts Dominic Martino and Matt Onay. MLB fantasy draft season is here. Be the most informed fan and set yourself up for a league win. Find Locked On Fantasy Baseball on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. I'll be back tomorrow to discuss Chris Getz possibly committing organizational negligence after saying no one on the free agent market jumps out to help the Sox in their outfield that is banged up even more after Austin Slater got hurt. Feel free to leave comments about today's discussion regarding the opening day starter race at the figurative quarter mark of spring training, the Sox missing out on a chance to bring back Jose Quintana, and another example of drafting and international free agent signing needing to improve for this rebuild to work. You can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at Todd J. Dub, or at Locked On Sox, or you can email me at lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com. Have a great day.